Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Slacky, Director of Public and Government Affairs for AAA Northeast, and I am delighted to be joined here today by Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. If you're on the webinar, you probably know all about him, but he's on his second term representing Connecticut, having been first elected in 2010. He's on a variety of committees, including Judiciary, Armed Services, and Veterans Affairs, but we're particularly interested in his perspective as a member of the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, including the Subcommittee on Surface Transportation, Maritime, Freight, and Ports. All lots of great stuff to talk about. So, Senator Blumenthal, great to have you here.
Wonderful to be with you, especially with an organization, and I'm a member, that so well serves motorists, people who use surface transportation. I am on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, which also has jurisdiction about the airports, our airlines, rail, really about all modes of transportation, as well as commerce and science, and they are all linked together in the way that people use our roads and bridges and highways.
And I mean, obviously, you and your colleagues have been celebrating the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act back in November. It's a big win for transportation. It's been hailed as a big win for bipartisanship and for the legislators and staff who worked to make it happen. I mean, it was work in progress for a whole year, but really for 70 years since the investment back in the 50s and under Eisenhower. This is really kind of a multi-generational investment. Now that it's enacted, how much focus is there on that committee on making sure that it's being implemented well?
Great question. A lot of focus. As a matter of fact, I'm back here in Connecticut right now and going around the state asking questions about what people think is necessary on the ground, what projects ought to be given priority, and what the state ought to be doing to really listen to people. And in announcing the passage of this law, what I said was, in fact, the most important thing the state can do right now is listen to the people who use the roads. I'm one of them. I literally live in Greenwich and drive every day at least to Hartford. Today I was in Norwich as well as Hartford. I'm a little bit late getting on the call. I apologize because I came from the federally qualified health clinic in Norwich, seeing how they are using telemonitoring equipment, the kinds of stuff that measures blood pressure and automatically transmits the results, the funding for these devices that people can take to their home and then transmit the results to the health center is coming from a federal grant, almost $1 million that they will be using for this purpose. And the reason I mention it is that people are continuing to use the roads, but they're also doing a lot more from home, whether it's healthcare or work. And as we come back to normal, and I think we will go back to a lot of what used to be normal, maybe people won't commute to New York from Fairfield County 5 days or 6 days a week. Maybe it'll only be 3 or 4 days a week. People are still going to use the roads, and they'll need the roads. And that's why this infrastructure program is so important. And I might just say, because you mentioned building the interstate, Dwight Eisenhower was president when we built the interstate. The greatest generation came back from the war and built the interstate, along with a lot of other accomplishments. That helped to make them the greatest generation. And we have a historic opportunity here. There's no exaggerating the magnitude of this effort and of its effect also in raising the consciousness that people may have about the importance to their pocketbooks. The average expenditure due to road defects like potholes for the average motorist is about $700 a year. because you got to replace tires, you got to replace shock absorber, all this stuff. And the average time spent commuting is much higher because people are in traffic jams caused by road defects and similar kinds of obstacles. So I think we have a really immense opportunity and we need to seize it.
I mean, you talked about hearing and getting excited about a variety of projects, and in Connecticut, we got 169 cities and towns. I'm not going to ask you to pick one or your favorite, but are there any projects that you're really excited about, or maybe any federal programs that you're particularly interested in seeing implemented?
Well, now that you mention it, I can choose a few. It's a little bit like, who are your favorite children? We have 4 children. I couldn't possibly pick between them, but the merge at 91 and the Merit, or the Wilbur Cross, I guess, as it may be known at that point, with 691. I'm not sure how many of your participants are familiar with it, but I did it today, and of course there was traffic backed up. It's a classic choke point. The 8491 merge here in Hartford, classic bottleneck. The famous Mixmaster down in Waterbury has been a problem for how many years? 20, 30 years. There are others, going through Stamford. There's almost always traffic one way or the other, no matter what the time of day. I could go through some more, getting onto the Merit at the Route 7 intersection. We can ask for a show of hands whether people have been there, but almost invariably traffic because of the entrance onto the Merit from Route 7, a bottleneck, one road merging into 2 lanes of traffic. So I think there is a measure of science here. It's not just art. Traffic has become much more studied. People are much more knowledgeable. We are trying to obviously save fuel until we go all electric. And hopefully it will, be gradually and be soon. And we'll have the numbers of electric vehicle charging stations. And by the way, that's also part of the infrastructure program. And I hope it will be even more. The 70 plus billion in there now sounds like a lot of money, but I think we need a lot more to make sure that there are adequate numbers of charging stations. So there is a lot of work still to be done, and the hundreds of billions of dollars, and it is hundreds of billions of dollars going into highways, roads, bridges alone, without even counting rail. 30 billion in rail for the Northeast corridor alone, I think is really a major commitment. And as you pointed out at the beginning, it was bipartisan.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you mentioned rail. I think that's a good topic because, we want the roads to not be congested. And I think, making sure that there's good transit service is an important part of that. The bill makes a big investment in public transit, not just commuter rail and not just Amtrak buses as well are also crucial, I think, in Connecticut. What can we do to make sure that this is, an investment that not only lasts the next 5 years for this reauthorization, but the next 25 and 50 years for transit specifically?
My hope is that people will see the benefits and it will have a base of support, a strong constituency. That's what will matter most in the appropriations process as well as the authorization process. There are 2 separate lines of approval for new funding. There has to be first authorization, and now we're actually going through the appropriation process for 2022. I'm hoping that we'll have strong constituencies for public transit. And you're absolutely right. Buses, very important in Connecticut. And a lot of the essential workers during the pandemic, the nurses, the supermarket employees, the transit workers got to work on buses or other kinds of public transit. People are now using railroads to commute between towns in Connecticut more and more. My hometown, Stamford, has more commuters coming into the city than going out. That's been true for a while, but if you'd said that 30 years ago, we would be a commuting center, no one would have believed you because everybody who commuted was going to New York. And I think it shows that the commuting habits are changing and will rely more on rail and public transit. And so I think that investment pays off. And you're absolutely right. You know, people would say to me, oh, well, you're talking to the AAA. You don't want to emphasize rail. Well, yes, we do, because people want cars off the road to make traffic flow more smoothly and thereby also make the environment better. You know, people who drive cars do it because basically they find it more convenient, or they have to. There's no public transit to the places they need to go, or their schedules don't mesh with public transit, or, you know, we live in a country that enables that freedom, but we should also provide other choices that are convenient and cost effective for commuters, so that if they want to work while they're getting to work, they can do it.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think there's our members are multimodal, right? They're driving, but they're also taking the train and the bus, and they're biking and walking. And like you said, it's a good thing for there to be cars off the road, because that helps the people who do have to be on the road. And I guess along that front, you know, thinking about climate, we've got some big climate goals here in Connecticut and nationally. And we know transportation is a major contributor to emissions. So what sort of policies do we need to make sure that we're meeting the emissions goals that we want to hit as it relates to transportation?
I think the federal government has to have emissions standards, and I, you know, been a long time supporter of those standards, and they need to be enforced. I think, fortunately, you know, the automobile industry is seeing the light. They have for a while. GM says its entire fleet is going to be electric by, I think, I don't know what their current timeline is. I think it may have slipped somewhat, but within, you know, 10 years, I think we will see radical changes in the electric vehicle market, so that it gains traction and becomes more available and affordable. For a long time, it wasn't affordable and available because they just were in short supply. And frankly, there's still automobiles generally are in short supply, but electric vehicles especially. And I think there again, just as in public transit and rail, demand will drive the availability of more capacity. I think we'll find the same in electric vehicles, but building those charging stations is also important for the federal government to do. And I've advocated, for example, restrictions on drilling offshore, which I think are important from an environmental standpoint, other kinds of measures to reduce greenhouse gases as well.
You've been, just switching gears for a little bit, you've been a big champion of auto safety really for your entire tenure in the Senate. You're a sponsor of the National Vision Zero resolution, and I'm just curious if you could tell us more about how you came to be an advocate for Vision Zero, and maybe what your what your thoughts are on the US DOT's National Roadway Safety Strategy.
I think it needs to be more aggressive. You know, all of the agencies responsible for enforcing the law, I think, need to be more aggressive. I was in law enforcement for 20 years as Attorney General of our state, as well as the Chief Federal Prosecutor, United States Attorney for 4.5 years. And I know as well as anyone that the law is dead letter if it's not enforced. You know, we can make the best laws in the world.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do in the Congress, but enforcement makes them real in people's lives. And so, for example, when I first came to Congress, we encountered the defective ignition switch, which literally killed people, some of them here in Connecticut, because GM and the federal agencies failed to spot it. And GM, in fact, knew about it at certain levels of the organization, failed to do anything about it. And that was a failure of enforcement as well as GM's own culpability. And so I think all of these agencies responsible for auto safety can be doing better, should be doing better. The DOT bears a direct responsibility. I think Secretary Buttigieg is very much aware of it, and it requires investing in the investigative capacities of those federal agencies. And NHTSA, for example, takes a long time to complete its investigation, sometimes years of, for example, railway or aviation issues. And if it had more staff, it could do its investigations more quickly and enlighten the other federal agencies more quickly. And the rules that are promulgated to enforce the law have to be done more quickly. And no question, they should be responsive to the industry where appropriate, but they should also be responsive to the consumers who use those vehicles. And the good news is, as you well know, and the AAA has been at the forefront of auto safety, and very, very commendably, automobiles are safer now than ever before. They're made of better materials. They are more easily drivable. I am sponsoring a measure that would require certain anti-drunk driving or actually impaired driving measures to be mandatorily installed so that any kind of impaired driving features or symptoms could be detected by the car, or distracted driving, detected by sensor mechanisms in the car. And I think we're going to have that kind of mechanism within cars, literally the way we have seat belts and airbags and other kinds of safety devices as standard equipment within a couple or 3 years. I think it's an idea whose time has come. And you're right, I have been a champion of safety because still we have too many deaths and injuries on the road. They cost dollars and cents. They also cause immense human pain and suffering.
And I think we have time just for one more question, but I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the distracted driving, the camera, the sensors in the vehicles. AAA has recently done some research on that, showing which types of cameras work better than the others. And I did want to ask about pedestrian and bicyclist safety, because we know that, that's probably one of the biggest categories that we've seen a huge increase in fatalities over the last decade or so. And cars are safer than ever before for occupants, absolutely. But as cars get larger, there's increased danger to pedestrians, and we've seen the sad results. So can you talk about kind of your priorities and how the infrastructure bill might help bike ped safety?
That is a wonderful question and very dear to my heart. As you know, the toll for pedestrians as well as bike riders is humongous on our roads. I went to a ceremony in Fairfield recently commemorating the lives lost, one fairly recently of a pedestrians simply walking. You know, bike riding and walking are increasingly popular. That's a good thing, great thing. And the infrastructure program does have a specific allocation of money. And forgive me, I can't remember the exact amount. What I can tell you is it's not enough. And we should be investing much more because cars are going faster, because they're more easily drivable, and because during the pandemic, there were fewer cars on the road, people could go faster, but pedestrians aren't going any faster, and they're not more agile if a car is coming at them. You know, I used to run every day. I no longer run every day. I do more swimming. But when I'm out on the road, I am just always astonished and alarmed by how close cars can come to runners or walkers and bike riders. And so we need more accessible lanes for walkers and riders. And I think that is a key part of safety. I've met, frankly, drivers who were involved in mishaps of this kind, and it's, you know, heartbreaking to talk to them because they had no idea, or maybe they had an idea, but they just were reckless and careless. But setting aside safety lanes or other kinds of measures for the walkers and the bike riders is really, really important. And we have a bill, and forgive me again, I can't remember the exact name of it. All these bills have very arcane names, as you know, which is why they're reduced to acronyms. And I have trouble remembering all of them. Being on the Armed Services Committee and on the Judiciary Committee, you know, the military has more acronyms than any other single agency, and Judiciary has a bunch as well. So I have trouble remembering all the acronyms and the names, but for anyone who's interested, my office would be glad to get you the names and the bill numbers.
Well, Senator Blumenthal, thanks so much for taking some time to chat with us this afternoon. I want to thank my colleague, Tracy Noble, who had some technical difficulties and wasn't able to join, as well as my colleagues, Fran Mako and Mark Shieldrup, who helped out on my end. And of course, Senator Blumenthal, your staff was extremely helpful. So thanks again, and let's do it again sometime.
We'll do it again. I'd love to. You know, again, thanks to the AAA for your service, as you've done for me personally. I've spent a lot of time out there in all kinds of weather. I tend to put a lot of miles on my car, going all around the state, and the AAA is always there for you. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to our audience members. Have a great day, everyone.